All right, welcome once again, Ed and Krista. Without further ado, I'll let you take over. Now you can share your screen. I'll let you take over the presentation. Let us know what's happening with Aurora and this $2 million safety study.
Okay, thank you, Tom. Thank you for having Krista and me here tonight. I'm going to share my screen, and then Krista and I will go through the presentation and be thrilled to answer any questions you may have afterwards. Okay, can everybody see the screen? Good to go?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a quick photograph of one of our favorite parts of the corridor, the artwork on the overpass near Oak Tree. And we're very fond of that. And I think Krista was leader of that art planning project along with community members. So the 2-year planning study that Tom mentioned is a joint study between Seattle Department of Transportation and King County Metro. And with that study, we have several goals in mind. One is to come up with a design for a vision for the Aurora corridor all the way from the North Tunnel Portal up to the city limits at North 145th Street. And the original funding for the planning study came from a grant from the Washington State Department of Transportation from their pedestrian bicycle program. So the main focus of the planning study is pedestrian safety and mobility enhancements along the corridor. That's the main theme of the study. And we're looking for ways to enhance safety and mobility and accessibility for all users of the corridor. And we also want to engage in a very robust and inclusive outreach process. We are reaching out to as many community members as possible, recognizing that there are many people who live near the corridor, who use the corridor, who travel along it, who go across the corridor, east-west. And we also want to recognize that the Aurora Avenue corridor is not just a linear segment of roadway. It is actually what some people would call an ecosystem. You have parks and green spaces, you have cemeteries along the corridor. You have lots of multifamily housing, especially in the far northern part of the corridor. We have a couple of urban villages along the corridor. So just taking into account all of those things when thinking about how we can best meet mobility and safety needs. King County Metro is a partner in this study, and I want to apologize that their staff were not able to join us for the meeting and presentation tonight. However, they are very eager to come meet with you another time so that you can have more dialogue with them. And I will do my best to represent their part of the study tonight. The King County Metro people are looking for ways to figure out how to make the current rapid ride line E even better, not just within the current corridor, but also extending further north up into Shoreline and beyond up to Linwood. In particular, they're looking for ways to help create better connection, east-west connection, both to current light rail stations like Northgate and future light rail stations that will be coming online in the next few years, including North 130th, 145th, and up in Mount Lake Terrace and Linwood. So there's a lot of the potential of the potential restructuring of the bus network that they want to look at, factoring in the E-line and these potential connection to other transit facilities. And recognizing that this is a long-term planning process, it's not only a planning study, but in terms of actually designing and implementing improvement, that's going to happen over a long period of time as the various light rail stations come into place. So a key priority of the planning study is looking at ways to group possible improvements and sequence them or phase them so that we can take advantage of funding opportunities in the years to come to help support design and construction work of the transit-related improvement. Likewise with the safety improvements as well. Okay, Krista.
All right, thank you, Ed. So I put in the chat, I'm Krista Dumpies. I'm the outreach lead on the SDOT Aurora planning study. Thanks for having us tonight. So we wanted to highlight that we are in the process of putting together an interagency team. So as you can imagine, a state route that runs through the city of Seattle has many interested stakeholders and jurisdictions that we need to consider for any changes that we might want to make. So being a state route, our Washington State Department of Transportation is a key member that we need to be collaborating with. So we'll be working with them to define operational assumptions for the corridor. So what's the baseline of what we need to maintain? Aligning with agency goals and corridor needs. We know there are many users of the corridor wanting to maintain or improve their accessibility and needs. And then also they are going to need to approve and approve designs and review any plans that we have. So we'll be closely working with our partners at WSDOT. As Ed talked about, Metro, King County Metro is also, we're working very much hand in hand with them. They are a part of all of our meetings for this project. Anything you see that is materials that go out, they have reviewed and contributed content. So this is very much a hand in hand kind of a relationship. So we're partnering with them. As Ed was mentioning, they're defining their transit design objectives to improve the rider experience, speed and reliability. They'll be looking at bus stops, locations, are they in the right place? Are there other improvements for existing stops, accessibility, and beyond the city limits if there's any opportunity to expand. SPU, Seattle Public Utilities. So this department within the city of Seattle. Our team has been meeting with this department because we discovered that there really is not a good drainage infrastructure south of 85th. So that is something that anytime we're making improvements along the corridor, we always look at our utilities and are there things that we can be partnering and doing at the same time. So developing a drainage model, coordinating with drainage improvements north of Green Lake, and then any potential GSI partnerships as well near Aurora. So they're a key agency that we're working with. Next slide. And then there's a few others we wanted to highlight that we're partnering with. We have our Office of Planning and Community Development. So they have a focus in the Aurora, Licton Springs urban village area, looking at land use. So they're going to be doing some outreach and partnerships with land use issues. So that, again, we need to make sure we're tying in hand with any plans that we come up with. So we're in contact with them. Seattle City Light coordinating. I know lighting is definitely a piece that we're going to be asking all of you about. So wanting to coordinate with them on any improvements or designs that need to be shifted. And then City of Shoreline. So our project goes up to the city limits. And so 145th, we're going to want to make sure that we're coordinating with anything that we might be doing that hits that city limit of Seattle and Shoreline. So lots of folks that we're needing to, and there's others too. The home zone program, other 130th project is coming online. So anytime we talk about Aurora, a lot of people want to have their hand in it. So we're going to do our best to do that coordination piece. And I'm going to hand it back over to Ed.
Thanks. So unfortunately, Tom was highlighting at the beginning of the meeting, Aurora, the deadly place, and in fact, it is the deadliest street in the city of Seattle. And that is simply an unacceptable situation that we are trying to remedy with its planning study and a larger segment of improvement that we can make along the entire corridor in the next decade, years to come. We have spent some time in the past few weeks analyzing collision data and police reports for the corridor, and nearly 1 in 5 of Seattle traffic fatalities have taken place along Aurora. And the most vulnerable people, of course, are those who are walking or bicycling or using a wheelchair. They're much more apt to be seriously injured. And pedestrians make by far the largest share of deaths along the corridor, even though they represent only 1 in 20 collisions. They represent 3 out of 4 fatalities along the corridor. So that's a very grim picture that we're trying to address with this planning study. There have been previous efforts to make improvements along the corridor. Back in 2003, Seattle Department of Transportation received a grant from the State Department of Transportation to implement a so-called route development plan. And unfortunately, that project fell by the wayside, partly because there were some concerns by businesses about access and left turns from their businesses. In addition, there was a lack of attention given to stormwater issues, which detracted from the project. And so that project never really came to fruition. Then in 2009, the city received a Washington State Traffic Safety Commission grant for the corridor. And that project resulted in a few short-term, low-cost safety improvements along the corridor. I think it helped to fund 1 or 2 new signalized crossings. In addition, education and enforcement efforts were given a boost with this one-time funding. And lastly, the State Department of Transportation recently repaved the corridor about 3 years ago. And in conjunction with that repaving, several small-scale spot improvements were made. I think some ADA curb ramps were added as several crossings as part of that repaving project. But there is so much more we can do, a lot more. Funding and budget. the funding has been cobbled together from several places. As I mentioned, we have a $1.5 million grant from State Department of Transportation Bike Pedestrian Program. The City of Seattle Department of Transportation provided $500,000 of match money from the Move Seattle levy. In addition, King County Metro is contributing $500,000, so it's $2.5 million combined for the planning study. And so this funding was received and cobbled together last year, and we were beginning to gear up the planning study when the Washington State Legislature this spring decided to appropriate $50 million from the Move Ahead Washington Transportation Package toward the Aurora corridor. And specifically, they earmarked $50 million for a roughly 6-year period between 2023 and 2029. And they specified that they wanted to see this funding be used primarily for a construction of improvement in the segment of the corridor between North 90th and North 105th Street. They also put a 10% cap on the part of funding that could be used for design work. So those are several provisos that came with this $50 million funding package. And so we took stock of all of it after the legislation made this appropriation, and we decided that the best course of action would be to use the $2.5 million planning study as a way to help guide us in the best use of the $50 million. And we recognize that the legislature said, please spend the money between these two streets along the corridor. And we recognize that there are improvements that probably need to be made in that part of the corridor. But we also believe that there are improvements that need to be made throughout the corridor, especially in the northern part. So we're preparing to use the planning study as a way to help define what the needed improvements are throughout the corridor, from the North Tunnel Portal up to the city limits at 145th Street. And then we're going to go back to the legislature and say, hey, here's what the planning study tells us. Here's what the community, here's what we found out and heard from community members during our planning study. We'd like to talk with you about the best way to use the $50 million that you have generously given us. And we're very grateful for that. So that's basically the course that we're planning to take. And even the $50 million is only a small part of the total funding that really is needed to build out the full complement of safety and mobility and transit-related improvements along the corridor. So there's no question that we'll also be pursuing other funding opportunities like state and federal grants. And there actually have been some federal grant opportunities starting to materialize in recent weeks. And I think that we would like to talk with our leadership about some of those opportunities. And it may be that some of those grant funding opportunities rely on a partnership between local government and community groups. Some grants are set up to require that kind of partnership. So I think there's a lot of opportunities that we can be talking about soon. All right, that's enough of that slide. Back to you, Krista.
Great, thank you, Ed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the outreach for this project. So very soon, within the next week, we'll be launching the project publicly, and our first phase is going to be a survey, which will be reaching out to the community far and wide to understand the key concerns that folks have. So would definitely love to have all of your input. Survey is completed. We are, it is off for translation. And so once we get that back, we'll be going ahead and launching that, hopefully end of this week, early next week. And the website is actually live, but we'll be going ahead and sharing that survey link on the webpage once it's ready and blasting that out. So that's our initial phase. The survey will be extended into September because we want to make sure that we include the schools in the area. So we'll be doing some targeted outreach to the schools in September. We have some great resources that we'll be working with to collect the survey data, not only online, but we'll be doing door-to-door outreach along the corridor, doing some intercept surveys at key places like grocery stores and the like, some pop-up events, community events participating. So really doing a big push to get the broader community to give us their input and what they see as the concerns. We'll be taking all of that information and compiling it and then pulling together some key concepts, some key themes, and inviting folks to participate in design charrettes over the winter. So most likely after the holidays, and pulling together some alternatives. So the goal is to have 2 to 3 alternatives that we would be designing. Then we'll take those alternatives back out to the larger community next year and get feedback on, okay, we heard your thoughts and the key concerns that you have, and here's now some designs for everyone to react to and see if we got it right and we're on the right page. And then we'll take all of those results and call them together, and the goal is to come up with one final preferred alternative that then would be moving forward in our process with the 50 million and bringing some focus to where the needs really are for ped and bike improvements along the corridor. So that's kind of where we're at with our goals for this particular phase of the project as far as outreach. And so in terms of how you all can be involved, really need to spread the word to get our email list built up. We cannot add email addresses without folks' permission. So, we're kind of starting from scratch. I've got some of the folks on this call and then staff signed up, but yeah, would love it. The listserv is active on our webpage, so folks can sign up now, and that is a great way to stay informed of opportunities for input. So spread the word to families, friends, coworkers, neighbors, and definitely invite you to take our survey. So that's kind of the first step of how we would love to have you all involved. So this kind of wraps up our presentation portion. We do have a project email. So this is going to be the best way. We have I have other folks on my team who are checking this daily. So it's a good way to get in touch with any of us. We also have a project hotline. This is our current website. I know it's quite long. I'm going to request a shorter URL for the time being. That is what it is. So we'll close out our presentation and open it up to Q&A. I don't know, Tom, are you going to facilitate or how?
I am, yeah. Thanks,
Okay,
thanks, Krista, and thanks, Ed. And Krista,
Yeah.
if you want to shorten that URL, you can feel free to take 99 problems and put that at the end of it. We'd be happy to share that with you.
Sure.
Sorry, Ed, I saw you were trying to say something. Go ahead.
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to add two things very quickly. First off, I just want to recap the deliverables that we are hoping to get from the 2-year planning study. The first deliverable is high-level cross-section of what the Aurora corridor, what we would like the Aurora corridor to look like. And these are high-level to like 10% design. And we've divided the corridor up into about 5 segments. So we want to get cross-section for at least one cross-section, if not a couple for each of those segments along the corridor between North Tunnel Portal and North 145th Street. The second deliverable that we want to achieve with planning study is 90% design for at least 2 small-scale spot improvements that we can make to the corridor sooner than later. And these possibly could be new signalized crossings. And so we're hoping, we definitely are committed to getting 90% design for those spot improvements so that we can pursue funding and get those improvements into the ground as soon as possible after the planning study is concluded. So that was one thing I wanted to mention. The other thing I wanted to quickly mention is that Krista and I and everybody else at SDOT on the Aurora team are extremely grateful for our partnership with the Aurora Reimagine Coalition. We've been on several of your community walks, and we've been setting up meetings with your leadership group, and finding those to be very productive. And I think several of your members have shared important demographic information as well as connection to businesses along the corridor. So all that is really valuable. And so I just want to thank you for that, and hope that productive partnership can continue so that we can make the corridor a much safer and better place for people using all modes of transportation. Thanks.
Thank you, Ed, and thanks, Krista, once again. We have a lot of questions here, so let's jump right into them. I'm going to be selfish and take the first question. I would love some clarification because I heard you at the beginning say that the study will extend from basically north of the ship canal, north of the bridge, to 145th Street.
I'm sorry, north of the north tunnel portal.
Okay.
About Harrison Street north.
Okay. Is it just then the KC Metro portion of the study only goes from north of the bridge because they have their own projects south?
Well, I would say that the SDOT portion of the study is that 7.5-mile corridor from the North Tunnel Portal to 145th. The Metro portion of the study will go farther north.
Okay. Thank you. I spoke with Metro before, and they confused me because they started saying things north of the ship canal. Okay, so SDOT's focused on the entire corridor. That's great because we also, as a coalition, are focused on the entire corridor. We have a lot of questions here that I'm relying on the other members of the core group to help elevate for me because there's too many. Who wants to jump in? I think Laura might have one ready.
Well, I was thinking that there was a question about business outreach that we wanted to address. Was that the next one? Did you have that one, Tom?
Yeah, I can jump in with that question.
Okay, why don't we do that?
Okay, let's do that one. Krista, thank you for that outreach overview and the plan for the coming year plus. What about business specific outreach? Do you have a plan, a timeline for outreach to businesses? Yeah, I'll start with that question.
Okay. Yeah, so we're in the process of developing that with our community liaison program. So the Department of Neighborhoods houses that program, and we're working with the coordinator. He has identified, I believe, 7 community liaisons who will be doing in-language outreach for the languages along the corridor. So we want to have an orientation with them to understand, because some of them may have connections with some of the businesses, and their own, so bringing in their own knowledge and expertise. So we're in the process of kind of co-creating that, and we're working on setting up a meeting with them for later this week. So happy to, collaborate. I know there's been a lot of work done as well by Casey and others in this group. So yeah, if there's an opportunity to kind of, chat further offline about once we sort of have a draft, happy to do that.
Awesome. I know that we at the coalition have been thinking a lot and talking with a lot of business owners about business specific issues. So we would love to bring in more business owners, more perspectives up and down the corridor, and talk with you all at SDOT about how we can best meet them in the process, in the outreach process.
Okay.
One other question, this is a very specific question. There are utility location marks on the sidewalk around 90th, 94th in Aurora, and also south of that area. Do you know what's going on? Is it SPU marking out some things in anticipation of this project? Do you have any idea?
Ed, do you know?
No, I do not. Well, did you say they were around North 90th and 94th?
94th and a little bit south as well. And I can check in as well with the home zone team at SDOT, because they may have more contact with SPU about that. I'm assuming it's SPU stuff.
Okay. Well,
there's going to be a lot of construction, I think, around the area. Okay, great. Laura, do you have a question ready?
Yeah, so there's been a couple requests in the chat for more information. And so just wondering if there is someone who has a link handy for the specific requirements for the move ahead package, or what WSDOT is planning on the various funding sources that are being proposed for the work on Aurora.
Yeah, I can get you that information. Yeah, can I email that to you, Laura, and then you can share it?
That'd be great. Yeah, we can get it out on the website, and with the ARC newsletter, we can have a follow-up to this with links to the additional information. Yeah, that'd be great.
Other folks in the core group, do you see questions to highlight? I see one from Linda Clifton, but I think she dropped off, so I won't belabor that question more.
She's still here.
I'm here.
Oh, Linda, you are here. You had a question about the Aurora Safety Corridor study from circa 2009. And I know Ed spoke to that briefly. Did you have more questions? Did you want to follow up? Because I remember you being fairly involved with that.
Yeah, I was on that, I think, on behalf of Fremont Neighborhood Council, and I still sit on their board. And there was a lot we planned and didn't have the money to do. But my real question is, are you building on anything that project created? I also had another question I put in the chat, which is, what's your outreach to schools and to residents, either on Aurora or adjacent to Aurora? Because Aurora is a huge barrier to neighborhoods.
Yeah, I didn't quite catch your first question, the one before the school, something about building.
It was the safety project that had been done earlier, and how you're building on the recommendations from that weren't funded and therefore weren't implemented.
And any data that was generated.
Oh, okay. That's a good point. That was well over a decade ago, and certainly we want to, extract as much value from past studies as possible. But again, a lot of change since then. I mean, things in some ways have gotten worse along the corridor. So we are fully cognizant of that. I mean, there's a lot of growth along the corridor, greater density, more traffic. And so we're just trying to take stock of the situation as is. And we certainly will take a look at the 2009 study, and there may be ideas for small scale spot improvements from that study that we can build off of. So that's a good suggestion. And then as for your question about the schools along the corridor, we're fully aware of that. In fact, on one of our community walks with your group, I think one of your very active members is a student at Ingram High School, was very interested in the Aurora study. And so, and also we saw that many high school students walk over to the corridor to catch the bus or make their way home on the other side of Aurora. And we know that there are a lot of other schools like Robert Eaglestaff and schools all up and down the corridor. So that's primarily why we decided to extend the outreach deadline through mid-September, at least mid-September, so that we have the best opportunity to capture input from students, staff, school families, and the school community for all those schools up and down the corridor. And if you have, we also have a former SDOT employee who is now working for Seattle Public Schools in the Safe Routes to Schools program. And we still have great connections with that person. And we are going to be working with her on coming up with good ways to do outreach to the schools up and down the corridor. So if you have any other thoughts, however, we would love to hear them.
Thank you.
Yeah, well, thank you, Linda.
And a preview to later in the meeting here, we'll actually be talking exactly about outreach to schools, because that's another key priority for the coalition. We want to reach out to businesses and schools and get everyone's input, especially the most vulnerable users up and down the corridor. Other questions from the chat? I'm looking through.
Tom, did we have a question that came in before the meeting about possible grant application?
Well, that is a good point. I wanted to bring that up, that Ed, I think it was you, maybe it's Krista, one of you said that you'll definitely be looking at more sources of funding in the course of the project, which is great. We also at the coalition, like I mentioned, are looking long-term in regards to improving Aurora, and we recognize it's going to take a lot more than 50 million, even, for $50 million investments by the legislature. So getting some of that federal money, some of those grant programs involved, and that's actually the most recent question here in the chat from Max. We're really curious as a coalition, what are you looking at exactly? And how can we support you? And if it's needing a community partner, by all means, count us in. We are happy to support the work. But are there any specifics that you're thinking about? Max's question here about the U.S. Department of Transportation's Safe Streets and Roads for All grant program. Is that one of the grant opportunities that's on your radar?
I have heard mention of that grant program. We do have a full-time grant writer in our staff, fabulous, very resourceful person. And I know he's looking at that. I know that we are also looking at the more recently announced Reconnecting Communities federal funding program that just came out last week, I think. And at first we were like, well, we weren't sure if we were qualified, but then we looked more closely, and then we reminded ourselves of the demographics along the corridor. And there definitely is a good possibility that we might qualify for that. I have not seen the grant announcement package itself, so I don't know what the timeline is for that and what the requirements are for, if any, for partnerships between government and community groups and other stakeholders. But we should stay in close touch on that. And we'll do that.
Yes, we will definitely follow up and stay in contact about that. I think there's a couple other Vision Zero grant opportunities that we know of. We would, anything that we don't want anything to fall through the cracks. We want to make sure that SDOT applies to everything possible, so we can get as much funding as possible for the corridor.
Yeah, it's really important because there's kind of a sense of urgency about making these safety improvements.
Yeah. Okay, any other questions? I'm scrolling up and I don't think there's any big ones outstanding.
I think there were a couple of questions about the relationship between the $50 million demonstration project that the state legislature was really focused on one area compared to the spot improvements or the safety improvements that might go along the entire corridor and might kind of dilute that money, and so that it wouldn't be as obvious how it was designing for the future. And so I didn't know if you wanted to talk a little bit more about that, or just the relationship between the state legislature's demonstration project and your vision for the study that you're doing.
Sure, I can speak to that very quickly. The planning study, was a grant that we applied for from the State Department of Transportation, and I know that the genesis of a $50 million appropriation was partly in a walk that included state legislators, other elected officials, city staff, and community members as well. And I think a lot of those members were from the Aurora, Lexington urban village area. And that's where the walk took place. So I think the state legislature just wanted to put together a funding package for Aurora that would, in their view, show the biggest bang for the buck. And so they wanted to concentrate, they thought maybe we should just concentrate the funding in this one segment that we know can use improvement. And not that they weren't aware that there are other parts of the corridor that deserve improvement as well. So I think, and it's something that it's not like the legislature came to us and said, hey, how should we spread out the $50 million? They just assembled a funding package, put in a proviso that'll be spent here. And I think they recognize that things change, and that that this planning study that we're about to embark upon may better inform how that $50 million can best be used to make improvements. I don't think it's, I don't think there's any intention of trying to dilute the impact of the $50 million by maybe saying some of that money should be spent further north in the corridor. I think there's a recognition that you can maximize the impact of that $50 million by not only concentrating some of it between 90th and 105th, but also earmarking some of it for specific location further north in the corridor, even further south. So I think that's more the mindset that we're trying to share with the legislature.
So Ed, are you saying that you all are looking to petition the legislature to adjust the requirements of that $50 million package?
We are talking about that. We have a legislative and intergovernmental relations coordinator, and that is his current thinking, that it is likely that we will talk with legislative staff about that possibility. And of course, we would like to include you in that conversation, because you have notions of how the money can best be spent, and how we can best make the corridor better. Yeah. But yeah, that's our intent.
Interesting. Lots of things up in the air still. Any other questions, Laura? Do you see any in the chat? I'm thinking that's.
I think we pretty
maybe
much covered what's in the chat.
Yeah, I saw a couple questions, and I just want to reiterate one more time. Let me see if I still have the link. There in the chat right now is the link to the project webpage that Krista mentioned. And if you click on the right side, there's a button that says subscribe. You can join the mailing list. I encourage everyone to do that, stay informed. We, of course, will be staying very informed, and we'll send updates to everyone as appropriate. So if you also would like to subscribe to our email list, that would be great. Stay in touch with us. And if there are no other questions, know that we will, of course, always be open to hearing more questions from you. And if it's specific for SDOT, we can take those questions and pass it on to Ed, Krista, and the rest of the team at any point in the future. So stay in touch with us. If you have questions in the future, don't hesitate to reach out. Thank you, Ed and Krista, both, and the rest of the team for preparing that presentation and for being here tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
And